Greetings and salutations, everyone. I hope everyone is doing well. And a happy 4th of July early to everyone. I hope everyone has a safe and healthy 4th of July. Today I have 2 subscriber submissions. We're going to revisit Luke from Taylor, Mississippi, and we are going to go to the East Coast. Before we get into these encounters, though, a couple links. As you know, I rely on my Patreon, my PayPal, and my merch to help this channel to continue to grow and go. All of those links are in the description below. I also have a second channel for creepypasta, fanfiction, and scary voice acting. Stories that, well, they really don't fit on this channel. Now, if that's anything that you're into, follow that link and give those stories a listen. You may just like what you hear. Now I've taken enough of your time. Let's get on with today's encounters. Shall we? Today's first subscriber encounter. I told my wife and my son about the Putnam County encounter in Connecticut with the EMT worker. The reason I told them about it is that it's very close to my sister's home. She lives in West Hartford in Connecticut, which is pretty close to Putnam. My sister's house is in the mountains, and she has a reserve in the back of her home. She lives in a community of maybe 20 houses or so. It is a very affluent community, so the houses are huge with at least an acre of land. They frequently see black bear, coyote, and all kinds of other wildlife in their community. When you drive into my sister's neighborhood, there is a patch of trees on the either side of the road. Then you drive up a steep hill that twists and turns as you drive up. There are houses on either side of that street as you drive up the hill, but when you turn off the main road, I think it's called Asylum Ave, you enter into her community with the trees on either side like I mentioned. Well, one night my wife and son went out to get food for everyone, and when they came back and entered the neighborhood, they saw what they thought was a coyote. But my son said he thought it was way too big. He said it was light-colored but huge. He said then the animal gathered itself and jumped across the street in one leap. He said it looked like it was floating as it jumped. The road it jumped across can fit 2.5 cars in it, so it is a wide street. He said as it landed on the other side of the street it was gone. He said he didn't think anything of it, but when I told him about the Putnam encounter, it all came back to him. My son is 10, but he's a very smart 10. He's mature for his age. This happened a few months ago around Thanksgiving. When he told me this, I was shocked and speechless. I never thought I would hear of someone having an encounter, let alone my son. My wife said she saw it, but not quite as well as my son had seen it. That's it, Jeff. Nothing exciting, but an encounter. Again, I am shocked and speechless about this. Today's second encounter. Now, I kind of thought about just doing the update with Luke from Taylor, Mississippi. But then people who are new to the channel might not have listened to the entire Taylor, Mississippi encounter. So I want to revisit this encounter, and then right before I include the new encounter, I will say this is the update. So, this is the encounter of Luke's family in Taylor, Mississippi. First, let me start off by saying our property is only a few acres in Taylor, Mississippi. We've had the property for about 50 years, I believe. My grandfather at the time was a handyman doing odd jobs for people and worked at the town's grocery store. At the time, my grandfather, George, was 22. He would get up at 4 a.m. and walk to work 2 to 3 miles each way, since he didn't own a vehicle. He did this every day for 3 years. Then he met my grandmother and they started dating, so When he would get off work, he would head to her house, which was a mile the opposite direction of his. Like any other day, he would leave her house 2 hours before it got dark. As he would head home, he would cut through a trail that would cut his trip down by 1.5. So, one evening, he was heading home, cutting through the trails he took many times before. He was about a mile into the woods, and he felt something was off, as if he was being watched. So, as he was walking, he heard something in the distance moving. He stopped. It would stop. As it's getting dark, he had no type of light other than matches, so he started to rip a piece of his shirt off and put dry leaves in it, and tied it to a nice-sized stick. Then took tree sap and applied it to it as well. While this was going on, the sound of something approaching got louder. As it was only a few yards away and almost completely dark, he would attempt to light his makeshift torch, down to his last 4 matches as darkness fell upon him. He was able to get it lit. As it began to blaze, it lit up the area around him. Standing 20 feet from him was this monster standing 8 feet tall with a head 3 times the size of any known wolf. An overcrowded mouth full of teeth and the arms long past its knees. Backwards legs, dark gray in color, with a really pissed off look. Like my grandfather had wronged it, and it was going to rip him to shreds with evil intent. He stood there looking at this demon, fingers over-exaggerated with 3-inch nails. Then it let out this horrific growl as saliva dripped from its mouth as if it had rabies. It charged at him, taking a swipe. He was able to get out of the way and press the torch to its side, burning it badly, and its fur caught fire. It screams in pain, sounds of a woman being butchered and a dog. He took off running for 30 minutes, lungs burning, breathing labored. He had a 1/4 mile to go. He wasn't going to make it, and his torch was almost out. He was able to extend the longevity of the torch as he was resting, trying to catch his breath. A few minutes went by as he heard a roar in the distance, and the creature bulldozing its way towards him. He takes off in full effect, running for his life. He sees his home in the distance. The creature closed the gap as he accepted the fact that he was about to die. Tears were pouring down his face. He yelled for his dad with everything he had, before he collapsed from exhaustion. He came to, found himself in his home. His father was in the kitchen at that time. The window faced the woods. His hunting rifle was always at the door. When he heard his son, he saw a light and the body on the ground and a massive animal less than 15 yards away, closing in. Without thinking, he grabbed his rifle, firing 2 shots, shattering the window at the creature, hitting it in the shoulder, quickly chambering another round, hitting it in the chest, causing it to flee back into the woods. That first encounter was the start of many more. Hey Jeff, Luke here. Sorry, I meant to get back to you sooner. I've just been really busy. So after all of that happened to my grandfather, his dad never saw the creature in detail to know what it was. His father started dropping him off at work and picking him up, until he was able to fix an old car that had been sitting there. As the days went on, he only saw the creature one time sitting on the ridge, which was a ways out. After that, he didn't see the thing for months. Went back to his regular life and ended up marrying his girlfriend at the time, later having a son, my dad. 6 months after my dad was born, strange things started happening around the house, which was built on the same property. Tapping on the bedroom window, doorknobs being tested, things like that. It would happen on a nightly basis, so one night he stood up and waited for the anomalies to happen, which it did as it was tapping on the window. He snuck out on the side of the house to flank what was making the sound, and to his surprise it was the creature from the night a couple of years ago with the scar on the side from being burned. The creature didn't see him yet, so he raised his rifle, chambered around as he did. The creature quickly turned and took off as he was firing shots at it. Only focused on that one that took off, he didn't see the one that was creeping up until it was almost too late. Baffled, "There's two of them," he said as he fired a shot at the other one as he quickly retreated into the house. Years went by with no further incident after that. A new group of walking wolves would traverse the property. By the signs of the tracks, sometimes a visual but no interaction until one night when my grandfather went to his son's room, my dad, to check on him there. There was the thing watching his son sleep in the bed right across from the window. Anger took over as he rushed to the window. Them being only a foot apart, separated by glass, the thing smirked and walked off. I'll send the rest in 2 email slot to write, so I'll cut some insignificant things out. If you require any other information from the 2 encounters, please let me know and I will answer them. The next encounter didn't happen until my dad was 3. My dad had an imaginary dog friend that he's been seeing months, and it would always ask him to come out and play by certain gestures. My grandfather didn't think much of it until one day my dad says Doggy only comes out at night. When it finally clicks in his head, it's one of the walking wolves. So he called a couple of his friends and explained what was happening. They devised a plan to try to kill it. So they got a couple of bear traps, placing them outside of my dad's window, blending him into shrubs. So, on that night, his son, fast asleep, my grandfather carries him into the other side of the house with his mom and one of his friends as he heads back to the room with the lights out and the window open, him at an angle with his rifle pointed towards the window. His friend was in the shed 15 yards away from that window with his rifle pointed in the direction of the window. The walking wolf shows up, but they believe it was aware of the presence of the friend in the shed, so it approached the shed instead of being towards the window. Said friend started screaming as it was trying to enter. My grandfather went to the window and fired a shot, ending up missing it. Then it took off. The creature stopped coming for a while. My dad grew up in his teens. His dad told him the history of the property and what goes on, that he shouldn't go out at night. But, like any other kid, would think that he was just telling him boogeyman stories to get him to come in early. So when his mom and dad would go to sleep, he would sneak out of the house to meet his friends at a lake a quarter of a mile from the house. So this one particular night, he snuck out of that house and didn't make it 15 yards from the house. There was this figure standing by the tree, 50 feet from him. "Who's there?" my dad said. Then the creature stepped foot into the light, and everything his father told him started flooding his mind. He started slowly backpedaling. As for every step he took, the creature copied. As he got to the window, the walking wolf sped up. Diving into his room, he quickly shut and locked the window. The creature pressed its face on the window, licking it from bottom to top. This left my dad traumatized. He didn't speak about it for weeks and didn't want to leave the house. Eventually, with the help of his dad, he was able to cope with it. It stopped coming around for years. He didn't have any more encounters until late into his adulthood, and early in mine, which I believe cost us dearly. Hey Jeff, how have you been? Hope all is well with you. I'm sorry it took me a while to get back to you. I was in the hospital for a few days, non-COVID-19 related. I have some lacerations from the back of my shoulder to the front. Pretty sure it's going to scar once it starts to heal up a bit. And not in risk of getting infected, I will send pics. But that's a story for another time. Right now I have only 50% use of one arm, so I can't type with it due to some nerve damage. I have my wife Lynn helping me, or I'll be here forever trying to type this one-handed. Anyway, back to the rest of the encounters. Years went by, 20 years or so, no further encounter. Life was back to normal for my family, and then I came along. I had a normal childhood, growing up, no encounters with those walking wolves that my dad and grandfather told me about. However, at 6 or 7, I had an encounter with a woodsman, as you call them, Bigfoot. I would play out in the front, near the wood line, and it would watch me and make waving motions. I never felt threatened. I would say it came to be my friend. I would go into the woods, it left trinkets there for me, and it kept the coyotes away from me. This went on for years into my young adulthood. I had no fear of the woods at all. I was friends with an 8-foot Bigfoot. The closest we ever got to each other was 10 feet. I was in my 20s at the time. My life took a change for the worst. I would spend hours in the woods, more than I would spend at home. One late summer afternoon, I was in the woods looking for my friend and couldn't find him, but had this ominous feeling that I needed to head home. So I did. I had the feeling something was watching me, followed me by light footsteps. So the naive me thought it was my friend, so I called out to him, going where I heard the noises. 40 feet away from me was this dog crouching down in the bush, looking at me. Then it stood up. It stood at least 7.5, maybe 8 feet tall, long muzzle, dark brown, almost black fur, and sharp-looking teeth. I never felt the need to carry a weapon before until then. Mind racing, can I outrun it to my house 300 yards away? Then it points at me with those creepy finger claws looking thing. 3 more came out and had me completely surrounded. I'm scared out of my wits. I put my hands up like fighting this thing was an option. Then a glance of something bulldozing its way through the forest. And came the mighty roar, like came from King Kong itself. Never heard anything like that before. It literally brought me to my knees and paralyzed with fear. It was my friend, pissed off. Never saw him that way. Almost looking demonic. I don't know if I gave a description. He's 8 feet tall. I know this because he stood next to a tree. I measured later. Anyway, 550 to 600 pounds, all muscle from shoulder to shoulder, 4.5 feet. Thickness from chest to back, 2 to 3 feet. Red, shaggy fur. No neck traps, looking like pyramids. He got between me and them. We were 2 feet apart as he shoves me to leave. As I take off running, one of the smaller Dogman creatures, 6 foot or so in height, proceeds to give chase, launching itself 8 feet in the air faster than anything known to man in my direction, passing the Bigfoot as he turned, grabbing it by its back leg in midair, slamming it so hard that the ground shook. And then he stomped on its head, killing it instantly. I proceeded to run, again as I was starting to lose sight of them as all 3 were on top of him. Making it to my house, telling my dad everything that had transpired, he calls my grandfather, telling him what was going on. He saw the Bigfoot on many occasions, and they had a mutual respect for each other. My grandfather felt it only right to help him since he had saved his grandson. He went to the location that I gave him, finding the walking wolves and the woodsman, down to 2 wolves. The second one was missing its bottom jaw. The woodsman, bleeding from its neck, shoulder, and stomach, was losing strength, and it dropped to its knee as my grandfather took a shot from his AR, hitting both creatures as they retreated, yelping. He didn't go near it because it was severely injured, and it might attack. He stayed with it for a couple of hours, making sure the wolves didn't come back, and it recovered some of its stamina, then stumbled off. Later that week, my grandmother found my grandfather mauled to death in his barn. Authorities came, saying it was a cat of some sort. Fish and Wildlife came, and some other alphabet agencies came, and were on the property for a couple of days. We mourned the death of my grandfather, oblivious to everything else around us, and what was going on our property for a while. We believe it was the ones that my grandfather had shot. I didn't have any friends at that time other than the woodsman that could have possibly died from his wounds. So my dad got a bunch of his friends who were hunters to go and kill the supposed cougar or mountain lion. They went into the woods tracking the predator. They found signs of heavy gunfire and chaos that had went on for about a quarter of a mile, blood splatter all over the area. This unnerved all of them that they quickly abandoned their objective. Not knowing whether those walking wolves were dead or alive made us feel robbed. Never been able to have closure. This happened around the years of 2000 to 2001. If William/Victor has any insight on that, it may give my family closure. I never saw the woodsman that saved my life again. Reply from William or Victor. Luke, let me first say that I am sorry for your family's loss, then on to your remarkable family history with these beings. I think I know what it's like to have a special friend, even though mine doesn't get to roam free as yours does. Let me start by saying we received a call from the Game Warden Service of Mississippi, and myself and 2 other agents came to the area. We got there the day after they removed your grandfather from the barn, and we traveled to view his body. After this, we returned to the area and were dropped off by the sheriff and entered into the pines. After traveling maybe 3/4 of a mile, we located a large male Bigfoot, badly injured but still alive. I approached and spoke to him in a calming voice and asked if he needed help, and that myself and my friends with me would help him if he wanted us to. I finally got enough courage to move close to him to be able to touch him and asked to look at the wounds. His neck and stomach were the 2 worst places, so we went dark and tranquilized him so we could transport him to Virginia to our doctors. That same night, about a mile beyond that spot, we intercepted 8 Dogman and we killed them all, and then flew them all back to Virginia. All of them were wild, and only one had a different bullet hole in his chest. After being in the doctor's side of the building for about 5 weeks, we tranquilized that Bigfoot and carried him to Hawk Mountain, or close to 3 Forks in northern Georgia mountains, and turned him loose. First of all, let me start off by saying since we lost my grandfather, we didn't have any more encounters with the walking wolves. We heard howls and knew they passed through the property, but never came towards the house. Me and my father would walk the property every month armed, just to make sure there was no disturbances or people that weren't supposed to be there. So we take a couple of our ATVs and traverse the property early in the afternoon, no incident of that nature. So as we got ready to turn back, I noticed a path at the end of the property that goes down. I never noticed it before, so I went to see where it led. And about 10 yards down, there's this hole in the ground, on an angle 4 feet in circumference. As I get close to it, it smells like death. Shining my light down in it, it goes deep, and at the entrance were some deer bones and other animals. I started hearing breathing as if something was sleeping in it. Then the wind changed direction, I guess carrying my scent into this den. The breathing stopped. It turned into a light growl. Once we heard that, we hightailed it out of there. Later that evening, I went to my dad's house and we were discussing what it was. Then we realized it was like a rest stop for the walking wolves that traverse through the property. Then we hear this blood-curdling howl, growl, woman scream mixture. My dad was like, I think it's pissed that we were at its home. No, Dad, it's not pissed at you. You were a good distance away. It's pissed at me. My scent is all over the den. So I went home and didn't go out for a while because of that, to see if the thing would let go and realize it was just a one-time thing. So as a precautionary measure, I sent my wife and our 12-year-old to her sister's house for a week. So a couple days go by as I think whatever was in that den forgot about the misunderstanding. as I didn't go back over there, but it didn't. It tracked me to my home and was watching me and knew I was alone. I wasn't going to bring my dad into this and have something happen to him. I wouldn't be able to get over it, as I felt I was the cause of my grandfather's death 20 plus years ago. So I usually keep my .45 in a fingerprint safe next to the bed, but decided to sleep with it under my pillow with a hunting knife as well. My instincts served me well. That night I was deep asleep and my body was trembling like I was in imminent danger. Moonlight shining in my room, I slowly opened my eyes to a wolf in my bedroom. Jeff. It got into my house and found me in my bedroom. My God, I couldn't spring up. It would have got me instantly. I prayed and prayed hard as I swung my hand with everything I had to be fast enough to get shots off as it pounced. I fired, trying to scramble out of the room as it grabbed me and threw me into the wall so hard my body left an imprint, disoriented and slowly losing consciousness. I fired again, hitting it in the chest. It stopped briefly for me to make it to my bathroom. My barricading myself in knowing that it'll be here in less than a minute. My left shoulder was bleeding and possibly dislocated. I wasn't able to use my SOCOM, which was at the side of my bed, so I abandoned the idea as the wolf started chipping away at the door. I had maybe 6 rounds left of the backup magazine in the nightstand drawer. I knew I wasn't going to make it out of the bathroom alive. Fired 2 shots at it as it was trying to come in. I then heard an AR going off through the missing parts of the door. I fired my remaining bullets as the wolf retreated through the front door. It wasn't a 30-minute standoff between me and the walking wolf. This only lasted 6 or 7 minutes, but it felt like time slowed down. My dad's house was only about 2 minutes away by ATV, so he heard a few shots go off from the direction of my house, hopped out of bed, grabbed his AR in boxers and all, got on the ATV and made it to my house in 2 minutes. As he got there, he saw that everything seemed fine, so he circled to the back and saw that the door was open and that the door handle was twisted so hard that the mechanical part was broken. Then he proceeded in with caution. Then he heard gunfire come from my room. He quickly came up the stairs, halfway, seeing the wolf making light work of the bathroom door. He put 6 shots in the creature's back. Then me fired as well, causing it to flee. I was rushed to the ER. Had I told them that I heard a noise outside my house and went to go see and got attacked by a big cat, ended up getting rabies shot and a couple of other. They cleaned it up, 4 gashes, and the 5th one, space apart from where it grabbed me, about 10 inches in length, and said that they weren't going to close it due to infection reasons. After that, we went to my dad's house and examined my house in the morning. Blood all in my bedroom, leading to the outside, the blood outside, dark red, burgundy color. So my dad and a few of his friends helped clean and fix the doors, reinforcing them. After all that was done, me and my dad decided to sell it, due to the fact that our house is no longer safe. Jeff, if my dad was a deep sleeper or lived a few minutes further, I would have been dead, no questions about it. I sleep with the lights on now. If you have any other questions, I'll be glad to answer. I survived a Dogman, but next time I might not be so lucky. This is why I'm leaving the property behind. Okay, guys, and shortly after that, Victor asked me for geocoordinates for Luke's den, and shortly after that, the guy, Luke and his dad, found the dead body of the walking wolf. and covered it with some leaves. So Victor asked for the coordinates. A couple of days go by, and the perception at that point of William/Victor and my channel was like William was lying. And I was a little unnerved by this. I was upset, clearly, because there had been a letter written from William Victor to Luke about his granddad, and I was like, my God, why would someone, make an accusation like that? Shortly after, Luke was outside, and some men in black with some heavy artillery proceeded to run down some Dogman, or as they call it, walking wolves. And at that point, I knew that Victor was telling the truth, because that's a very strange coincidence for that to happen. And I know for a fact Luke isn't lying, because he doesn't know me and I don't know him very well, so he was not covering for me with that story. Just a crazy part of this whole experience and encounter with Luke. Now on to the most recent update. Jeff, just caught up on the episodes. I was at least 5 shows behind. Wow. Oh my God, I am literally at loss for words, but I don't think he's dead from the encounters I had recently. But I do believe he is in trouble, and I will tell you why. Last week was my dad's birthday on the 20th of June, so me and my dad and a couple of friends decided to go camping and hiking. I suggested the North Georgia mountains of the Appalachian Trail for personal reasons. You will soon find out. So we took our motor home on a 6-hour journey, reaching our destination around 7 in the evening. We got out, settled, and unhooked the 2 ATVs, set up a campfire, and told ghost stories. It was an uneventful night, as we turned in for an early start. It was the next morning, as we hopped on the ATV to check out our surroundings. I was personally searching for a long-lost friend, knowing that I would never find him. We were armed with handguns. Our SOCOM and ARs were in the RV. We found a ravine about a half a mile away. As we were discussing where we should go next, everything around us went silent. We unholstered our weapons, readily to engage what was making its way to us, and they sounded heavy to my surprise. It was a family of Sasquatch, and they weren't happy that we had impeded on their territory. I will send the rest in 3 parts, as it's too long for me to type at this moment. Mind you guys, he's still hurt. The Dogman attack, that was the last part in his home, was recent. So all of this is within this year, or within 2020, minus the stories prior to with his granddad and dad. But this has been going on for generations. We've got grandfather or great-granddad protecting granddad, then son, then grandson. 4 generations. Anyway, back to it. So we were met by rocks being thrown at us from a distance, then whooping. One of my dad's friends wanted to take a shot in the direction of the commotion. I urged him not to do it. It'll only make matters worse. In the distance, I saw 3 juveniles crouched behind some shrubs. As our attention was on them, a massive one was approaching from our rear, very angry. It stopped about 50 yards away, then roared. My dad's friend John turned and fired out of fear, barely missing it. Then it charged at him. I got in between them as it stopped shy of 30 feet of us. It was almost 9 feet tall, red hair with patches of gray scars over its stomach and neck. As I looked closely, it looked like an aged version of my old friend, which I was certain it was by its wounds that my late grandfather told us. I started crying, thinking that I was reunited with my friend. However, he didn't feel that way. He had a look of "I want to kill you," which terrified me and forced me to raise my gun towards him. I called him by the name I gave him years ago, Big Red, but it didn't reach him, no emotion. I told the rest of them to slow back towards the ATV. I will soon follow. So, as I proceeded to back away, every 3 steps I took, he took 1. As we made it back to the ATV, we peeled out. Then Big Red gave chase on all 4s. Then, stopping, grabbing a log, launching it at us, barely missing us. We made it back to the RV unharmed but shaken. Didn't go back out for the rest of the day. I was scared, confused, and depressed at the same time. My long-time friend wasn't the friend that I remembered, so the next day, it still being on my mind, we decided to go fishing to get my mind off of it. Which we did, and it helped a lot. We caught a lot of spotted bass, a few trout. We were out there for a few hours. The area where we were fishing was about 1.5 miles away from the campground. So we're heading back on our ATVs, and as we are riding, we saw movement in the brush keeping pace with us. I initially thought it was one of the walking wolves. I couldn't be any more wrong. It was one of those wolfmen Victor had been talking about. Black as night, looks like a hybrid from the underworld. It gained enough speed to take our cooler of fish and smirked, like, "I got your food and there's nothing you can do about it." That night we packed up and left. I will tell you what happened when we got home over the phone. This is the first email that he sent me, but this is the last part of the story. Hopefully Luke gets a hold of me pretty soon. We've been communicating, not regularly, but off and on. He was supposed to give me a call last night. Last night. Sorry, got home crashed. Got met by armed individuals on my property asking me about the walking wolves on the property and how many were killed. Do I have a body? If I try to expose these creatures, that I would regret it. The last person who tried to put this information out met a fate worse than death and is no longer in sane mind. I think they've been intercepting my emails, so be careful. I will send you what happened to us in the Appalachian Trail and possibly call you tomorrow to talk about what's going on. So that's everything right there. I know a lot of people are calling BS, but it's really hard to let everybody know what's going on because, to me, it's happening to me and people around me. It seems like a movie or make-believe, but it's not. It's crazy that this has even happened. The last interview I did with Victor, I don't know what happened, but I couldn't upload it. I would have had it out at like 10 at night, but had to really finagle stuff, and finally got it out at 3 in the morning. There's just been a lot of weird stuff going on. I know people are like, the CIA would never email you, this, and that. Well, if you look up how to get a .gov email, it's not easy. I was talking to a friend who is retired Air Force, and they agreed with me. Also, then another person wanted to call BS and say that CIA.gov is not an actual email, that it would be UCIA at ucia.gov. Well, that's a public email for the public to contact the CIA, and that has not worked properly since 2016. People have sent me things to try to help check things out and verify, and I have verified everything that I can. I am very proficient with a computer. I have a fairly decent grasp on how to find information and look for things. So I appreciate all the help, but I've done pretty much everything that anybody has sent to me. Right now, I am going to be in contact with a couple of people, key people, who hopefully working with them and throwing questions and answers off of them, kind of bouncing it off of them like a wall, I can figure out what the hell is going on. Like I said, I started this channel for fun and a way of getting encounters out to people, and now it's turned into something completely different. I'm still going to continue to try to bring as much truth to you guys as I can, because it's a passion, and I'm pretty I'm pretty adamant, about going down this path and trying to find out the truth. And I'm not going to stop until I do find some truth. I know I'll never get to the bottom of it, but at least I can get to maybe a 3/4 way point. I don't know. And with that, guys, I want to bid you farewell.